On the 19th of March 2022, the partially mummified body of a 42-year-old male was found in a makeshift grave in the garden of a house on Moor Street, Northampton, England. A post-mortem on the decaying body determined that the cause of death was a stab wound to the right-hand side of the man's neck, splitting the right jugular vein and piercing the esophagus and the trachea. With an entry width of 3.7 centimetres and a depth of 6 centimetres, the stab had to have been executed with a substantial degree of force. After careful analysis, the body was eventually confirmed as belonging to a local man named Nick Billingham. Nick hadn't been seen since November 2021. Who did this builder and father of one in, and why? Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the story so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. 48-year-old primary school teacher Fiona Beal was a well-liked and highly respected teacher at Eastfield Primary Academy, Northampton. Claire Mills, the head teacher, described Fiona as a strong and capable professional whose key strength was her ability to build relationships with children who needed additional support. On the 1st of November 2021, Fiona rang in sick, triggering an absence of hers of more than 10 days. Her claim, however, that both she and her live-in boyfriend of 17 years, a 42-year-old by the name of Nick Billingham, had contracted COVID-19 and were required to self-isolate, turned out to be total codswallop. In the months prior to this point, Nick and Fiona had been undergoing relationship counselling for a multitude of reasons, a particularly important one being Nick's confession to having fathered a child with another woman. On this point, in fact, Nick was a serial cheat, and Fiona had long since become aware of this. Notwithstanding, in this same phase of time, Nick wrote about Fiona as kind-hearted, generous, and stated that she was the most beautiful woman in the world. He seemed, moreover, to feel genuine remorse for the said infidelity of his. That said, when, in spring 2020, the pandemic struck, Nick and his girlfriend were both furloughed and, like so many others, they were confined to their home. This triggered constant rowing between the two, relating to matters of sex, money, and just about everything else in between. The very day that Fiona called in sick at work, Nick had been out working on a house renovation, while Fiona herself had stayed at home and smoked a substantial quantity of WEED. Can't quite say it as it should be said, in case YouTube, how shall I put it, demonetises this video. And I'll say now that there are further words in the course of this video that I have to disguise for the same reason. When Fiona's boyfriend returned, Fiona got him to take the hot bath that she had prepared for him while promising him sexual intimacy afterwards. On finishing his very relaxing bath and entering the bedroom, Nick found his girlfriend draped over the bed waiting for him. After settling himself onto the bed, he happily put on the eye mask that his evidently very horny and, in this moment, delightfully seductive girlfriend offered him. Similarly, he made no objection when Fiona asked to tie him to the bed to fulfill a kinky fantasy that had come to her. Trussed to the bed and blindfolded then, Nick had no defence whatsoever against his girlfriend's subsequent act of jabbing the knife that she had been hiding in her dressing gown pocket into his neck with ferocity and rage. In a state of physical agony and mental shock, Nick was no less able to breathe the question, why? Fiona duly explained, like the savage psychopath that she was, that she would never let him hurt another woman again. The minutes that it took Nick to actually die were minutes, as I've said, of sheer agony, his girlfriend, to remind you, having severed his jugular vein. After wrapping Nick's body in a plastic sheet, Fiona dragged the corpse downstairs, damaging the banisters in the process, and then lugged the body out into the garden. While she left it in an area that was mainly out of the view of her neighbours, it was no less highly inconvenient for her that her neighbours were undergoing home renovations at the time, drastically reducing her garden's privacy. All the same, the killer proceeded to dig what can only be described as a makeshift grave made of plastic sheets, badly mixed concrete, breeze blocks and compost. Finding, after using up all those materials, that she hadn't bought enough of them to fill the hole, she promptly headed down to her local B&Q to buy 10 50-litre bags of compost, 10 22.5 kilogram bags of Cotswold stone, and a grey plastic trough. On completing Nick's burial, she then painted over his blood splatters, which had been left all over the bedroom. She then rearranged furniture in the living room to block the view of his grave, and then burned Nick's belongings out in the garden. Nick's blood had seeped into the mattress during the murder, so Fiona dumped the thing in the basement. Now feeling confident that nobody would suspect that her boyfriend had been murdered in his home by none other than her herself, Fiona embarked on her well-rehearsed cover-up of Nick's disappearance. The second her dead boyfriend's family and friends started asking where Nick was, Fiona told them that he had left her for another woman, a story which, initially at least, the man's family and friends didn't doubt, given their knowledge of Nick's infidelity. Fiona reinforced her cover story by sending messages from Nick's phone to his friends and family, pretending to be the man himself and reassuring everyone that he was fine. To add to her sick and deceitful nature, Fiona would invite Nick's very mother around for drinks and tell her stories, while her son's decomposing body lay only a few metres away outside. During the months that Fiona spent in her job after returning to it on the 12th of November 2021, nobody noticed any difference in her behaviour. She seemed entirely normal. Shortly after the 8th of March 2022, however, the head of her school, Claire Mills, you may recall, requested the police to perform a welfare check on Fiona. Having called Fiona's mother and learned that the reason that Fiona had given her for her sudden disappearance was completely different to the reason that she had, on the 8th of March itself, given for that at work, Claire had immediately grown beset with worry. In contradiction to what Fiona had told her mother, you see, Fiona was not away on any residential course that she, Claire that is, had authorised. It sounded to Claire like the explanation for her absence that Fiona had given her, namely things not, quote, being right, unquote, was much closer to the truth. When both Claire and Fiona's mother naturally confronted Fiona about her two stories, Fiona told them that she was fleeing. On March the 15th, police, who had, days earlier, found Fiona's home empty, found the killer holed up in a holiday home in Cumbria. After packing the woman off to hospital, in view of the suicide attempt that they rapidly discovered that she had made, police found, in their search of the cabin where she'd been staying, an extremely concerning journal. In this piece of writing, Fiona confessed her appalling act against her boyfriend, saying, quote, "He spat on me and threatened me during sex. The things he said and did fueled my dark side. I call her Tulip 22. She's reckless, fearless and efficient, ruthless. I started plotting as Tulip 22 after he had gone to bed. November the 1st. I had smoked all day. While he was in the bath, I kept the knife in my dressing gown pocket and then hid it in the drawer next to the bed. Hiding his body was bad. Moving a body is much more difficult than it looks on TV." Unquote. As you might imagine, this piece of writing soon led police to Nick Billingham's improvised grave, situated in his girlfriend's very back garden. In fact, it was the garden of a home that they shared and jointly owned. After changing her initial not guilty plea to the charge of murder to a guilty plea, on the 30th of May 2024, Fiona got 20 years. A stupidly soft sentence, if you ask me.
A detailed schedule of events spanning the period from the 27th of October 2021 through to March 2022 shows your planning, how you acted to fulfill that plan, and it sets out the details of the deception you engaged in after the killing. In her victim impact statement, Nick's mother, Yvonne Valentine, speaks of her loss. Nick was aged 42 at the date of his death. Nick was, in her words, and I quote, "my beautiful little boy with a cheeky smile. Nick was so loved by his family, his friends and work colleagues. My mother, Nick's grandmother, had to endure the news that you had killed her firstborn grandchild just weeks before her own death. And I witnessed the impact of this news on her as I watched my mother's health decline and die with a broken heart. all caused by you. All you cared about was your own self-preservation and doing anything in your power to show Nick in a bad light. I've had to listen to evidence from professionals as to what they believe you did, how you planned everything and your actions in the minutes after you killed Nick. You showed no regret in your actions and instead went online using Nick's money to purchase cleaning, replacement items to cover up that you had killed him. You brought everything you used to bury him with his own money, which I find diabolical and disgusting.
If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.